August 1944. The entire German army in France was collapsing. 3 months earlier, in May, Adolf Hitler had been confident. He'd told his generals that the invasion would fail. The Allies would be pushed back into the sea. German defenses were impenetrable. The new weapons, the V-1, the V-2, the new jet fighters would turn the tide. Then June 6th happened. 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy. Within a week, it was 1 million. The beaches turned red with blood, German and American both. But the Allies kept coming. The beaches became a foothold. The foothold became a breakout. By August, American tanks were racing across France. The Wehrmacht was trying to hold a line that couldn't be held. Entire divisions were getting cut off. Soldiers were surrendering or trying to break through enemy lines. Some were just disappearing into the chaos. Colonel Ernst Bäumer was 38 years old. He'd been in the Wehrmacht since 1935. He'd fought in Poland. He'd fought in Russia. He'd fought in Africa. He'd survived things that shouldn't be survivable. But he'd also watched his army get smaller with every campaign. His regiment, what was left of it, was supposed to defend a sector near Chartres. In early August, they still had maybe 2,000 men. Good men. Veterans. But equipment was getting scarce. Ammunition was running low. And the Americans just kept coming. By August 20th, Ernst's regiment was surrounded. The Americans had broken through on both flanks. Command was telling them to hold their position, but holding a position meant certain capture or death. Everyone knew it. That's when Ernst made a decision. He would gather whoever wanted to go, volunteers only, and try to break through American lines. They'd move at night. They'd avoid major roads. They'd try to reach German lines to the east. It was desperate, but staying meant being trapped. 32 men volunteered. Not many, but enough. They left at midnight. No vehicles, just rifles, ammunition, and water. They moved through French farmland that had been peaceful for 4 years and was now a war zone. Burned out tanks, German and American. Dead soldiers, German and American. Villages that had been abandoned or destroyed. Ernst kept them moving. No stops. No fires. Just forward, always forward. Around 3 a.m., they stumbled onto a small village. Ernst didn't know the name. It was one of 1,000 French villages that looked exactly like all the others. Stone buildings. A church. A fountain in the center. Dirt roads. But something felt wrong. Ernst held up his hand. The men stopped. One of his sergeants, Weber, a veteran of Russia, tough as iron, whispered, "Sir, look." Ernst looked. In the darkness, he could make out shapes. Large shapes. On the southern edge of the village. "Vehicles," Ernst said quietly. "American vehicles." They crouched down and moved forward, staying in the shadows. As they got closer, Ernst realized what he was looking at. It wasn't a combat position. There were no soldiers in fighting positions. No machine gun nests. No defensive line. It was a depot. Ernst had seen American supply operations before. Depots. Supply dumps. Ammunition stockpiles. But nothing like this. The village had been converted into what the Americans called a supply hub. On one end, there were dozens of trucks. Massive vehicles. Much larger than German trucks. They were arranged in perfect rows. Canvas covered. Military green. Each one looked like it was worth a small fortune. But the trucks weren't what stopped Ernst dead in his tracks. It was what was in the trucks and, more importantly, what was around them. On the southern edge of the depot, there was an entire section dedicated to fuel storage. Metal drums. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Ernst had seen fuel depots before, but never on this scale. These drums weren't scattered or hastily organized. They were stacked in perfect rows. Each row aligned with military precision. And there were so many of them that the eye couldn't count them at a glance. Ernst turned to Weber. "How many do you think?" Weber squinted in the darkness. "I don't know, sir. Hundreds. Thousands," Ernst said quietly. "Look at the organization. Look at how many rows. Look at how deep the rows go." They lay there in the darkness, watching. It was about 3:30 a.m. The guards were posted, but not heavily. Ernst counted 6 men. 2 near the vehicles. 2 near the main supply building. 2 doing a patrol. The guards weren't expecting an attack. Why would they? German forces were supposed to be surrounded and falling back. Nobody expected a small German patrol to stumble into an American supply depot in the middle of the night. One of Ernst's men, a private named Hoffman, maybe 20 years old, whispered, "Sir, we could destroy it. We have grenades. We could blow up those fuel drums. Set the whole thing on fire." Ernst didn't answer immediately. He was watching, counting, thinking. Finally, he said, "No, we're not destroying anything. We're getting out of here." "But sir," Hoffman protested, "if we can destroy this fuel." "We won't," Ernst said firmly, "because if we stay here we get captured or killed. And the fuel gets replaced in a week anyway. Move out. Quietly. We head east." But before they left, Ernst did something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He crept forward, staying in the shadows, and got closer to the fuel depot. He wanted to understand what he was looking at. He read the markings on the drums. Stenciled in white paint, U.S. Army, gasoline, high octane, dates. All of them within the last 2 weeks. These drums had arrived recently. Very recently. Ernst started counting. Not every drum, just the patterns, the rows, the columns. He knew how much fuel was in a standard American 55-gallon drum. He'd seen enough American equipment to know the specifications. He did the math in his head. Rows of 20, columns of... He estimated. It was dark, hard to see, but at least 100 columns deep. Maybe more. 20 times 100 is 2,000. 2,000 drums times 55 gallons per drum is 110,000 gallons. Ernst counted again. Maybe he was overestimating. Maybe it was only half that. 50,000 gallons. He walked back to where Weber was waiting. 50,000 gallons, Ernst said quietly. Maybe more. It's hard to tell in the dark. Sir, 50,000 gallons of gasoline. Just sitting here, in this village, that we found by accident. In August. Weber still didn't understand the implication. We should come back with a demolition team. Blow it up. Ernst shook his head slowly. No, Weber. No, I don't think we should. Why not, sir? That's 50,000 gallons of American fuel. If we destroy it. If we destroy it, Ernst said, it gets replaced in a week, maybe less. But that's not the point, Weber. Then what is the point, sir? Ernst looked back at the depot one more time, at the trucks, at the organization, at the sheer volume of material, at the casual way it was just sitting here, waiting. The point is that if there are 50,000 gallons here in this village in the middle of France, then there are probably 50,000 gallons in the next village. And the next. And the next. Which means... Ernst trailed off. He didn't finish the sentence. Means what, sir? Ernst looked at Weber. His face was grim in the darkness. It means we've already lost, Weber. We've already lost. They moved out of the village at 3:45 a.m. They had to. Staying meant getting caught. The depot was too well guarded, and they were too few. For the next 72 hours, Ernst and his men moved east. Through forests, across streams, through abandoned farmland. They avoided the main roads. They avoided American patrols. They moved at night and hid during the day. On the third day, they encountered a German patrol. A major named Kessler recognized Ernst and brought him to a command post. It was hidden in a forest, a makeshift headquarters for what was left of German Army Group B in that sector. Ernst was exhausted. He hadn't slept properly in 3 days. His clothes were torn. He had a cut on his face from a blackthorn bush. But the moment he arrived, the major wanted a full report. How many Americans did you see? Kessler demanded. Hundreds, sir. Maybe thousands. Hard to tell. They're moving fast. They don't seem organized. But they are. If that makes sense. Equipment. Superior to ours, sir. Their tanks are better. Their trucks are better. Their weapons are better. But more importantly, they have more of everything. Kessler nodded. He'd heard this before. Every officer who came back from contact with American forces said the same thing. American superiority in material. But then Ernst said, "Sir, I need to speak with the regimental commander. Not about immediate tactical situation. About something else." Kessler looked annoyed. What could be more important than the tactical situation? "Sir, please. It's important." 20 minutes later, Ernst was in front of Colonel Friedrich Kraft. Friedrich was 51 years old. He'd served in the First World War as a young officer. He'd fought through the Second World War as a veteran. He was one of the few German officers who was starting to understand that the math wasn't working out in Germany's favor. "Sir," Ernst began, "I found an American supply depot." Friedrich looked up from his papers. And there were 50,000 gallons of fuel, just sitting there, in the middle of the French countryside. One depot, probably one of many. Friedrich didn't react immediately. He just sat there, looking at Ernst. Then he stood up and walked to a map on the wall. It showed France, roads, rivers, towns, and scattered across it, small red marks where German units were positioned. "Show me," Friedrich said. Ernst pointed to a small dot, a village whose name he didn't even know. Friedrich studied the map in silence for a long time. Ernst watched his face. The colonel was thinking, calculating, understanding. Finally, Friedrich said, "You realize what you're telling me?" "Yes, sir. I think so. You're telling me that the Americans have created a supply system so comprehensive, so massive, that they can station depots like this all across occupied France. Not just one. Not just in major cities. In villages. In the countryside. They can fill these depots with fuel, ammunition, food, everything. And they can do it while they're fighting a war." Ernst nodded. Friedrich walked back to his desk. He sat down heavily. He looked old suddenly. Older than his years. "How long would it take us?" Friedrich asked. "To create a system like that?" "We couldn't, sir. We don't have the capacity. Not anymore." Friedrich pulled out a piece of paper. He unscrewed his fountain pen. And he started writing. His hand was steady, but his face was grave. He wrote, "I have discovered evidence of American logistics capabilities that suggests the war cannot be won. The Americans do not fight with superior tactics or better strategies. They fight with an industrial and logistical system so advanced that any comparison to German capabilities is meaningless. They can afford to lose tanks. We cannot. They can afford to lose trucks. We cannot. They can afford to lose fuel. We cannot. They can afford to lose soldiers. We cannot. Because they have more of everything. The war is lost. Not today. Not this month. But it is lost." Friedrich folded the letter. He put it in an envelope. He sealed it. "This is for the High Command," he said. "Though I doubt it will change anything. But someone should know. Someone should understand why we're losing." The letter was never delivered. Friedrich was captured 2 weeks later. But he kept writing those letters. Variations on the same theme. Each one a different way of saying the same thing: we cannot win. Not because we're not brave enough. Not because we're not skilled enough. But because we cannot match American industrial capacity. What Ernst didn't know, what Friedrich didn't know, was the true scale of what America had built. That depot with 50,000 gallons? It was one of hundreds, maybe thousands, and it represented just a tiny fraction of American logistics capability. The system started in America, in factories, thousands of factories, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, building everything. Trucks, jeeps, weapons, ammunition, canned food, medical supplies, clothing, shoes, socks, soap, everything an army needed to fight. And not just one of each item. Hundreds of thousands, millions of some items. In 1944 alone, America produced 96,000 aircraft. 96,000. Germany was producing maybe 5,000 a month at its peak. America was producing almost 8,000 a month. Tanks. America built 49,234 Sherman tanks. Germany built 1,347 Tiger tanks. Not even close. Trucks. America built hundreds of thousands of trucks. Germany was scrounging to find enough vehicles to move supplies. The organization of production was almost as impressive as the volume. American factories had assembly lines, standardized parts, quality control, workers trained specifically for their jobs. The whole system was designed for maximum efficiency and maximum output. A tank that took Germany 6 months to build could be produced in America in 8 weeks. A truck that was a masterpiece of German engineering took twice as long to produce in German factories as it did to produce in American factories, and the American trucks lasted longer. But production was only half the story. The other half was delivery. Ships. The Americans built Liberty ships. Basic cargo vessels designed to be built quickly and cheaply. America built 2,710 of them. Most were designed to last only 5 years. They were meant to be used hard, worn out, and discarded. Built to be replaced. German U-boats were sinking ships. Fast. In 1942, U-boats sank over 1,600 ships. But America was building new ships faster than Germany could sink them. It was a mathematical impossibility for Germany to win that battle. By 1944, U-boats weren't even trying to stop the flow of supplies anymore. They couldn't. The Allies had figured out how to hunt them. Destroyers, depth charges, aircraft. The ocean became hostile to German submarines. So the supplies flowed across the Atlantic. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of tons of material. Every week, every month. Those ships arrived in Britain. They were unloaded. The supplies were warehoused, organized, cataloged. Then trucks picked them up. The Red Ball Express, the Americans called it. Not an official name. But that's what soldiers called the supply route that was keeping the entire American and British armies supplied. 6,000 trucks, running 24 hours a day. Two-way traffic on the same roads. Loaded with supplies going forward. Empty on the way back. No stops. No delays. Just constant motion. A German general named Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, would see American production statistics after the war. He would say, if the Allies had realized how weak we were, they could have ended the war in 6 months. The only thing that saved Germany was that they didn't understand their own strength. But Ernst understood. Friedrich understood. Every German officer who saw American supplies understood. The Americans weren't trying to outmaneuver Germany. They weren't trying to be clever. They were simply overwhelming Germany with material. You can't beat that with tactics. You can't beat that with strategy. You can't beat that with courage. Because courage doesn't repair a broken tank. Strategy doesn't feed an army. And tactics don't overcome a 10-to-1 advantage in material. Ernst spent 3 weeks with Friedrich's unit. During that time, he and Friedrich talked extensively about what they'd seen. Not just the depot, but the implications. Friedrich showed Ernst reports from other officers. A captain had found an American ammunition depot. Shells stacked as far as the eye could see. Thousands of shells. Tens of thousands. Maybe hundreds of thousands. Another officer reported seeing American food supplies. Canned rations. Coffee. Sugar. Chocolate. More food than German soldiers had seen in years. Another reported American medical supplies, bandages, sulfa powder, morphine, everything a field hospital could need and then 10 times more. It all pointed to the same conclusion. America had created a logistics system that was so far ahead of Germany's that there was no comparison. Friedrich did some calculations. He showed Ernst the math. If America is producing 96,000 aircraft a year, Friedrich said, and Germany is producing 40,000, then in 5 years, America will have built 480,000 aircraft and Germany will have built 200,000. That's a 2.4-to-1 advantage. But it gets worse. How? Ernst asked. Because American aircraft are simpler to maintain. They break down less. So even though the ratio is 2.4 to 1 in terms of numbers, in terms of operational aircraft, it might be 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. Friedrich showed him more calculations for tanks, trucks, ammunition, supplies. Every category, Friedrich said, America is outproducing us by factors of 2, 3, sometimes 4 times. We can't compete. Not in one category. Not in any category. The only way we could win is if we made a separate peace with one of the Allies. But that's not going to happen. Churchill won't surrender. Stalin won't surrender. And America is just getting started. Ernst looked at the calculations. The numbers were cold, logical, undeniable. When did you know? Ernst asked. When did you first understand that we would lose? Friedrich thought about it. 1941. After Russia. When I realized that Germany couldn't possibly produce enough material to fight Russia and America at the same time. I knew then. I've been trying to understand how we could still win. But deep down, I knew we were finished. So we've been fighting a war we've already lost for 3 years? Yes, Friedrich said simply. We have. Brave men have died. Good men have died. For a war that was already lost. That's what bothers me the most. Not the loss itself, but that we could see it coming. We knew it was inevitable. And we fought anyway. Ernst understood. He'd seen good men die. Soldiers who were friends. Soldiers who reminded him of his own son, if he'd lived to become a soldier. Ernst's son had died in 1938, before the war even started. A childhood illness. But Ernst sometimes thought about what his son might have become. Not a dead German soldier in Russia. That's what Ernst hoped. Ernst and Friedrich's unit was overrun 2 weeks later. The Americans broke through in a sector to the south. The Germans tried to hold, but they didn't have enough men. They didn't have enough ammunition. They didn't have enough fuel. Friedrich was captured. Ernst managed to escape and eventually made his way back to German lines. But there were fewer lines to make it to. The Germans were being pushed back. Germany was being invaded from the west and the east. In September, Ernst was transferred to a unit in Germany proper. By October, he was defending German territory. By November, he knew the war was over. Not officially, Hitler wouldn't surrender until May. But tactically, operationally, strategically, it was over. The Allies had too many soldiers, too many tanks, too many aircraft, too many ships, too many supplies. Germany couldn't replace any of it. For every German tank destroyed, Germany built 1 replacement. For every American tank destroyed, America built 50. The math was impossible. Ernst survived the war. He was captured by Americans in March 1945. He spent 2 years in an American POW camp in Germany. The conditions were decent. He had enough food. He had medical care. He had shelter. In 1947, he was released. An American officer, a major named Thompson, interviewed him before he was released. Thompson wanted to understand German strategy. Why did you think you could win? How did your leaders think you could defeat America and Russia at the same time? Ernst answered all the questions. But then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Thompson said. "When did your government decide to create the logistics system you created? The supply lines, the trucks, the depots. When was that decided?" Thompson thought about it. "I'm not sure I know what you mean exactly. But the American Army was always oriented toward mobility and supply. We learned in the Civil War that armies need to be fed. We learned in the Spanish-American War that supplies matter. So by the time World War II started, we had already been thinking about logistics for decades. When the war actually started, we just scaled it up." "Scaled it up," Ernst repeated. "Yes, that's one way to describe it." "Why do you ask?" Thompson said. "Because," Ernst said, "that logistics system defeated us more than any weapon did. You had better fighters, better tactics. But what really defeated us was that you could afford to lose. You could lose 100 trucks and replace them. We couldn't. You could lose 1,000 soldiers and replace them. We couldn't. You could lose fuel and replace it. We couldn't. Your supply system didn't just keep your army supplied. It gave you something that we didn't have. What's that? Thompson asked. Choice, Ernst said. You had choices. Every decision wasn't a matter of survival. You could take risks that we couldn't afford. Because even if you lost, you could replace what you lost. We couldn't. That 50,000 gallons of fuel I found in that French village? That represented not just fuel, but the fact that you didn't need that depot. If it got destroyed, you'd build another one. We couldn't. Thompson nodded slowly. So you're saying logistics won the war? No, Ernst said. I'm saying your logistics system made victory inevitable. Weapons don't win wars. Organization wins wars. Production wins wars. Logistics wins wars. And your logistics were on a scale that we literally could not comprehend. Ernst Bäumer lived until 1978. He wrote some memoirs. They were published in Germany but never translated into English. He talked to some historians. He gave some interviews. But the story he always came back to was the same one. That night in August 1944, that French village, that depot with 50,000 gallons of American fuel. That moment, Ernst would say in interviews, was when I understood the true nature of modern warfare. It wasn't about generals or strategies or brilliant tactical maneuvers. It was about industry, about the ability to produce, about the ability to move what you've produced, about the ability to sustain an army on a scale that had never been attempted before. When historians studied the Second World War, they focused on battles. Normandy, Stalingrad, Midway, El Alamein. These were the dramatic moments. These were where the war seemed to be decided. But the officers who really understood, the German officers who had seen American logistics up close, they knew the truth. The war was decided in American factories. It was decided in American shipyards. It was decided on the roads of France by the Red Ball Express. It was decided in every depot that got filled with supplies and emptied and refilled again. One German general after the war said, "We lost the war not because Americans were braver than us or smarter than us. We lost because Americans understood that you don't win wars with better tactics. You win wars with better logistics. And their logistics were on a scale we could never match." Friedrich Kraft, Ernst's commander, survived the war in a POW camp. He died in 1956. In his memoirs, published in Germany in 1952, he wrote extensively about the importance of logistics. "A general can be brilliant," Friedrich wrote, "but a brilliant general can't move an army that doesn't have supplies. He can't feed soldiers who don't have food. He can't move tanks that don't have fuel." Germany had brilliant generals, but America had better logistics. And in the end, better logistics defeat brilliant generals every time. American military strategists studied this after the war. They understood what Ernst and Friedrich had understood. That victory wasn't just about having better weapons or better soldiers. It was about having better organization, better supply lines, better production. The American military doctrine after World War II was built on this understanding. Logistics became central to military planning. Supply lines became as important as combat units. The ability to move material became as important as the ability to move soldiers. Other nations learned this lesson too. The Soviet Union built massive logistical systems. Britain reformed their military supply structure. Germany's reorganized army, when it was allowed to rearm, was built with logistics as a central consideration. But it was America that had perfected this in World War II. America had shown that you could transport millions of soldiers across an ocean. You could supply them in hostile territory. You could keep them fed, armed, and mobile indefinitely. That 50,000 gallons of fuel in a French village wasn't just fuel. It was the physical manifestation of American industrial power. It was proof that Germany couldn't win. It was the reason why, no matter what tactics Germany employed, no matter how well German soldiers fought, the outcome was predetermined. Ernst understood this. Friedrich understood this. Every German officer who saw American supplies understood this. But it took the rest of the world longer to understand. It took historians decades to properly analyze what had really won World War II. It wasn't the D-Day landings, though they were crucial. It wasn't the atomic bomb. It wasn't any single weapon or strategy. It was the American logistics system. It was the ability to produce 300,000 aircraft while Germany produced 100,000. It was the ability to build 2,710 cargo ships while U-boats sank them. It was the ability to run 6,000 trucks, 24 hours a day, for months on end. It was the ability to fill depots like the one Ernst found with 50,000 gallons of fuel, and fill the next depot and the next one and keep filling them until the war was over. That's what defeated Germany. Not courage. Not determination. Not sacrifice. Those things mattered, but they weren't enough. What defeated Germany was the mathematical certainty of American industrial capacity. The inevitability of being outproduced by a factor of 2, 3, sometimes 4 times across every category of military equipment. You can't win a war against mathematics. And Germany was in a war against American mathematics. Ernst Bäumer understood that on an August night in 1944, in a French village in front of 50,000 gallons of American fuel. And he spent the rest of his life trying to make sure people understood what that moment meant. Not just to him, but to the world.